Um, First of all, I'm very excited to announce that we have our first podcast here. I used to like this show and watch it with my wife, comedians in cars getting coffee. So this one is not gonna be probably as cool. This is engineers getting coffee, and the first episode that we have is we have a super cool audience guest here that is
With Nikhil.
Nikhil. So Nikhil, thanks for joining us today. I'm very excited that you can be the first guest in our podcast. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Gustavo, for the intro. My name is Nikhil Kumar. I am a partner solutions engineer with Confluent. My role with Confluent is supporting our partners, our system integration partners, and helping them be successful. I joined Confluent about roughly about a year ago, and loving the role and working with cool people like Gustavo at ONIBEX. And thanks, Gustavo, for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. So I'm gonna introduce myself as well. I'm Gustavo Estrada. I'm the CEO of ONIBEX. And basically, we started our journey 8 years ago with that vision of democratizing SAP data. Before that, I was an SAP consultant. I've been in the SAP ecosystem for the last 20 something years. And we saw this pattern of, having to send data out from SAP to somewhere, and it was pretty much always starting from the scratch and always asking the same questions and always following this recipe where we say, you know what, we should do something pre-packaged, we should do something to avoid this mess of starting a project from scratch without considering like troubleshooting and the throughput and those kind of things that from a project to project you realize that pretty much you're gonna face the same challenges. And having SAP, being an ERP that is very structured, we always had pretty much always same consistency of data, at least to an 80%, and then the 20% was always some configuration level. So that is ONIBEX, and we're gonna explain it a little bit more about how we do things, how do we prepackage innovation. But for now, I would like to, for this podcast, it's going to be about data warehouse modernization. And basically, we're going to talk about some of the challenges of the traditional data warehouses. Um, and here, Nikhil, if you don't mind, I'm going to explain some of these challenges from the SAP perspective, because this podcast is meant to introduce a little bit more about Confluent to the SAP audience. But I'm going to point out some of those challenges that we have seen on the SAP ecosystem, and then I'm going to turn it to you.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right. So SAP created this data warehouse that is called BW, and the business warehouse. And that BW was created back in the day where hard drives of 1 terabyte didn't exist. So today we go to Walmart and we get a 1 terabyte hard drive for a couple of $100, right? I mean, it's very affordable. But because back in the day, that a capacity, the capability to store large amounts of information, and the processing power was also very limited, you had to first consolidate your data and then send it to BW. And because of that, just imagine if you want to have your sales data, you only are sending the daily data in a batch way, and then potentially just consolidating some of those queries and created a report that can be consumed at the end of the week or at the end of the month. And that was analytics, and that has been analytics for the past many years. But then that's where Confluent came into place to change the game from data at rest to data in motion. So that is a total game changer because now data is in motion based on events that are happening in the real world, and is transforming the way that enterprises are interacting and using the data. So with that, Nikhil, I'm going to pass it to you to explain us a little bit of the role of Confluent in the data warehouse modernization.
Sure. Thanks, Gustavo. I'm going to actually use a couple of slides. So I'm going to actually share some slides real quick. Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk about is how Confluent actually helps with maximizing the ROI for data warehouses and data lakes that Gustavo just mentioned. And to do that, I want to talk about our shift left approach and our use cases specifically around that. So what is shift left, and how does Confluent actually help enable this? So shift left is a new approach, a new paradigm wherein you're shifting all of your processing and data governance as close to the data sources as possible, as close to where the data is generated at generation time. And by doing that, you're actually making sure that you process your data once and you process it right, and you govern it once and you govern it right, all the way to the left of your pipeline at the beginning of your pipeline that is as close to the data generation as possible, as close to the data source as possible. Now, why does this matter and why do customers care? Well, if you do employ the shift left capability or the methodology, like I said, all of your processing is done once, and you can reuse your data assets or data process data and govern data across your entire data pipeline downstream, and you can eliminate duplication of processing in all of your target systems because you're doing it once as early as possible in your pipeline on the left of your pipeline. That reduces compute costs, it reduces engineering costs, but also keep in mind you're governing your data once all the way towards the beginning of your pipeline, which would be you're reducing data quality errors and you're reducing the seeping in of bad data or dirty data, which means you're not spending time, and costs fixing your broken pipelines in your data warehouse ingestion and processing. One of the most powerful use cases that Shift Left helps with is data warehouse and data lake ingestion and processing. And that's because a lot of organizations actually struggle to unlock the value of their data in these systems, in these data warehouse and data lake systems. Let's take a look at why that's the case. Like I said, data teams and data organizations struggle to unlock the value of the data in these systems, and specifically for use cases like data-driven analytics, data-driven reporting. And that's typically because data teams, data engineering teams don't have access to the right data. And even if they have access to the data, they don't have access to it in the right format. And a lot of times the data is dirty data, right? So let's take a look at why that's the case. And what is the root cause of the problem? The root cause of the problem is today's data pipeline approach. And the data pipeline approach, specifically the data integration approach, and more specifically talk about, as you can see here, the ETL and ELT approaches, which is the extract, transform, and load, and extract, load, and
Right.
transform approaches. So what actually is the issue there? Well, as you know, pipelines are the actual plumbing that is required, the essential plumbing that is required to implement the extracting and processing of this data. But a lot of times these pipelines are batch processes and batch based pipelines, which cause more
Yeah.
problems than they actually solve. And with the latest advance of, or the popularity of ELT pipelines, this is even more prominent. And let's take a look at why, right? So here's a typical ELT pipeline. You're taking data from your transactional operational systems and you're putting it you're loading it into your data warehouse, typically in the raw state, right? Unprocessed state in the original formats. And the next step
Yeah.
in your ELT pipeline is to clean up that data, do some data cleansing, data processing, and so on and so forth, and to get it to, excuse me, to get it to a point where it is actually ready to be further processed and ready to explore for further deeper analytics. And then the next step would be to take that kind of just enough cleansed data and get it to a golden standard. And that is by implementing deeper analytics and more complex data processing. That golden standard of data is now ready to be consumed by dashboards, reports, AI processes, and so on and so forth. The issue
So
here
here,
is, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, sorry, just to complement here, Nikhil, and this is already a change on the approach that SAP is proposing, because SAP is proposing to have extractors that might have the data consolidated, not the raw data itself. So this is the new paradigm of data lakehouses, data warehouses, and I like it because then you have the flexibility of creating that bronze, silver, gold layer, and as you said, this is what this new paradigm of the the new way of processing data. But there is a challenge here that you're describing with these pipelines. So go ahead. Just I wanted to point out that
Mhm.
this by itself, it's already a change in paradigm on how we are seeing things on the SAP side.
That's great. I'm glad you added that point. That's a very good point. So some of the challenges that you just mentioned are, as you can see here in red. So a lot of times these extracts from the operational systems are typically, batch extracts. Sometimes micro batches, sometimes mini batches. Could be 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and so on. And they create these what we call low fidelity snapshots of the data in your data warehouse. And these low fidelity snapshots, as you can see here, typically very quickly become inconsistent with the actual data that's changing in your operational systems, and they become stale snapshots. And the problem there is that you're making these decisions based on low fidelity snapshots that are stale, which in turn becomes poor decision making, right? The second thing is these snapshots of the data, our data engineering teams sometimes, organizations, data engineering teams will create these local snapshots and local copies of the data that get reprocessed over and over again. And as a result, you increase compute costs, but also have wasted hours of processing. Not to mention that a lot of times you are implementing or stitching together incremental updates from your source systems into these local copies, which requires incremental CDC or change data capture logic. And a lot of times that becomes very complex when you have multiple sources and multiple targets, right? So then you have the additional complexity of data quality. What if somebody changes some process over here and the schema changes or the schema shifts? You start getting dirty data, garbage data, and that seeps in. Again, that's going to be used for your dashboards and reports for decision making, which is critical. And last but not the least, you have the concept over here about pipeline inheritance. What I mean by that is a lot of times data engineering teams will inherit some pipeline that another team has developed, and there is very little knowledge or documentation about that pipeline. And the engineering teams are fearful of making changes to an existing pipeline because they don't know where it's going to break and when it's going to break. So what do? They create a brand new pipeline on top of what already exists, right? And this creates what we call pipeline sprawl, right? So now you have tons of pipelines that you have to maintain. So the end result is these batch pipelines in the end require multiple tools, multiple investments to serve actually these data needs and data use cases. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can see how complex it gets, right?
And Nikhil, if I may, point out, you already mentioned two profiles: data analyst and the data engineers.
Mhm.
That by itself in SAP, those are new terms. In SAP, we have, the developers, we have the functional consultants, and then we have very highly specialized BW consultants. But then, you know, again, you're going back to something that is not getting into this new way of doing things. And it looks cleaner when you see that bronze, silver layer,
Mhm.
bronze, silver, gold layers. That looks easier to understand. And sometimes we feel that in BW, if somebody try to get try to go from, let's say, Snowflake or Databricks or Redshift, it feels very complicated to understand how BW works. So this feels just a way that is the future. The future is going this way, right?
Yep. Yeah. and that's a good segue. That's a very good point, Gustavo. That's a good segue to this particular methodology, which is the shift left methodology. So we believe there is a much better approach to unlocking the value and the business value of your data. And that is by shifting all of your data processing and data governance to a actual streaming approach, and more specifically, a real-time streaming approach, wherein you're actually doing the building your data and processing your data once, you're governing your data once, and they're doing it right. And all of that trustworthy data is that you're processing once and governing once all the way towards the beginning of your pipeline, as close to the source and data generation as possible. All of that trustworthy data is now available within milliseconds of its creation to all of the downstream systems. Now, what are the benefits? Like I said earlier, you can reuse this data set in multiple target systems. You don't have to duplicate processing, so you're reducing compute costs, you're reducing engineering time and costs. But also, if you're governing it once towards the beginning of your pipeline, you're reducing the actual data quality errors dramatically. And that means you're not having broken pipelines, garbage data seeping in, or dirty data seeping in, which in turn increases the ROI of your data warehouse systems and data lake systems. Not to mention, reducing the cost and increasing the ROI, but also all of these trustworthy data products that you're creating in real time are available now to your operational systems, and you can build new applications much easier, right? So that is the shift left approach. And this is using what we call Confluent's data streaming platform. And as you can see, the data streaming platform has the ability to connect to all of your data sources and your data targets, the ability to stream data, in real time across your platform, which is basically a network of event streams, continuously flowing through your pipelines and your organization, process that data using Flink, and that's done as early as possible in your pipeline to the left, so shift left, and then of course govern, right? So that is the entire data streaming platform that we offer. And then my last slide would be, just to kind of tie it all together, maximizing the ROI of your data warehouse and data lake systems. And as you can see here, because you're doing your data governance as early as possible, you're reducing the data quality issues, you're reducing the seeping in of dirty data, which is reducing your overall cost and increasing ROI because of reduced engineering time, reduces broken pipelines. Of course, compute costs, because you're doing all of your processing once versus doing it in multiple data warehouse systems, you're reducing compute costs and avoiding duplicate processing, right? And then last but not the least, you're increasing data engineering productivity, right? So rather than your data engineering teams, looking for the right data and hunting for the right data format or the quality of the data, and fixing broken pipelines, their valuable time now can be invested in new initiatives, right, for new projects that they can work on. And as you can see from the quote over here at the bottom of your screen, this is from head of data from one of our Fortune 100 financial institutions. I won't go through the entire thing, but this is 40,000 ETL jobs today that they have, and shifting left, the actual data governance being shifted left is transformational to the organization, all right? So with that
Nice.
said, I'll hand it off back to you, Gustavo. Hopefully that made
If we
sense.
can,
Go ahead.
absolutely. Can we go to the previous slide? I just wanted to ask you a question here,
Sure.
because I've seen some organizations that have already heavily invested on data analysts, data engineers, that they know some technologies. They might know Java, they might know SQL, and
Mhm.
you mentioned Flink.
Yes.
So for them, that might be a new word, right? I mean, it's who's Flink, right? So
Yes.
how can they leverage some of these skills? Is it possible to leverage some of those skills that the companies have heavily invested across some of the different departments on their organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I'm glad you asked that, Gustavo. So Flink, if folks are not familiar, Flink is now the de facto stream processing standard out there. So any real-time stream processing, Flink is the way to do it. Flink and Kafka are pretty much projects, open source projects, Apache projects that are a couple of years apart. But the growth of Kafka and the growth of Flink are pretty much lockstep, so it mirrored each other. And it is a de facto standard, like I said, if you want to do any processing. Now, back to your question about, what Flink is and how we can leverage it if you already have existing skills. Flink has in tremendous flexibility in terms of the actual language support. So you can have Flink jobs being written in Java, it can be written in Python, but if you're a SQL developer, it can be written in Flink SQL, right? So
Beautiful.
you can leverage all of those skills, and it comes with about 150 plus predefined package functions that you can use in terms of the capability and functionality. So very, very powerful, but also I should mention it can scale at tremendous volumes, right? So the scalability is unbelievable in terms of the data volumes.
So you can transform basically raw data that will be the bronze layer into entities, data products that could become the silver layer using simple Flink, SQL commands.
Yes, absolutely. And it's as simple as that, but the power of Flink is the ability to, you can do stream processing, which is real time, and you can also do batch processing, which would be, some sort of a batch that you define, like an hourly batch or something
It's
like
great.
that. So you can do that very easily using your existing skill set, and do that as early as possible in your pipeline. So as to the left as possible, that's the shift left capability that Flink enables.
That's That's awesome. I remember back in the day when I started coding in ABAP, ABAP used to be pretty ugly. The way to code in ABAP, 20 years ago is very different on the way that you are coding in today's, era. And, it feels something similar when we used to start creating these Kafka pipelines. It used to be, something that you had to be very heavy into some of these. But now with the simplicity of SQL, it feels a lot less easy to understand how to create those pipelines and computing to create those entities.
Oh, it's a lot easier. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, definitely.
Great, great. So we're going to go to the next topic here. That is, how can we put this all together back to SAP? In ONIBEX, we created something that is called OneConnect. And this OneConnect product, it's a way to integrate SAP, ECC, S/4HANA, and any other ABAP-based stack SAP solutions with Kafka in real time, but also in batch. So why do you want to integrate SAP with Kafka? I'm gonna put that very simple example. When everybody nowadays have used Uber, for instance. So when you request an Uber, you are at your house and you're probably getting ready to go to your office or somewhere, and you request the Uber. That request goes out to different drivers that are going to, one of them is going to accept your request, and then you can see the driver moving in real time. And by the time that the driver gets out of your right in the driveway, you can get out of your house, so the driver is not losing time waiting for you, and you're not losing time waiting for the driver. So that is an optimized decision that basically now we can split, the business intelligence in two different segments. One is the traditional business intelligence that we know, and those traditional business intelligence basically are based on a bunch of data from previous years, where you want to give that high level perspective to your executives. And then for those kind of use cases, you might argue that you don't need real time, right? Because it's high level. You want the executives to create strategies for the business, for the managers to create tactics on how to optimize a process. And for those two levels, you don't need real time probably. But then it comes you want to have your entire enterprise to be data driven. And you're missing that level that is the operational level. The operational level is not going to require a lot of data. You don't want to see on the Uber, the a heavy background of rides and how many, rides on time. You don't have a huge dashboard in that use case in Uber. What you want to know is where is the driver at this specific point in time. Because if you get the location of the driver even 10 minutes ago, if it's not real time, then one of you guys are not going to take an optimal decision. So you might be waiting out of your house for 10 minutes or more, 30 minutes, whatever the refresh of the data is, and then you are wasting time. And time is very valuable, especially nowadays that we're in a hyper connected reality. So Nikhil, that use case of Uber, is Uber using Kafka by any chance? Oh, you're on mute, but I'm
Sorry,
reading your lips.
I was on
Go ahead.
I was on mute. Yes, Uber is actually one of Confluent's biggest and oldest customers, and they started using Kafka as one of the pioneers, and now they're customers. So yeah, definitely.
That's great. So that means that now we have a new way of experiencing life because now we have this streaming engine that is called Kafka. So we're connecting SIP with Kafka to send all of the events that a user is capturing in SAP because a real world transaction or real world event is happening, whether that is sales, procurement, production, you name it, quality management, whatever. Now, one of the big challenges that we have in SAP is when it comes to understanding the data. So we have those business experts that understand production, that understand procurement, that understand sales, but they're not SAP experts. So like I said, we started ONIBEX with that premise of um, having something that is prepackaged, not just the technology, but also the methodology, the journey. How is that journey going to look like for your enterprise? So chances are that you're using order to cash process in SAP, for instance. So if you're using order to cash process, you have different events that are happening in your enterprise. And you probably after a negotiation, you create a sales order. But probably you create a contract, probably you create a quotation. Something is happening after the event of negotiation and closing a sale. So if you're using a sales order, that means that that sales order has an entity inside SAP. So we already took the time to map each of those processes inside SAP and map each of those tables inside SAP and how those tables are related. So now when we start a project, basically what we go is that we go with the business and we ask the business, okay, explain a little bit about your process, your order to cash process. Oh, okay, I've had different process, B2B, B2C, for wholesales, for industrial, and we start getting into those kind of things. Out of that, we understand the flow and we get those entities. So we create a domain mapping, a domain model out of that mapping. And with that, then we can go with the technical guys, with the SAP functional and technical resources for us to understand the specifics of their data. Oh, I'm using this custom CDS view. I'm using this Z table. I added these custom fields here and there. I have this Z program. Okay, so we add those up from a very simple perspective because we don't want to intimidate anybody. So we start with a simple Excel document. So from there, basically in SAP, we have a solution that is going to help us map those entities from the Excel document into the SAP now. So this is an S4HANA 2023. And what we have here is, let's say, for instance, a production order. So this production order, in SAP, we have these, um, you know, um, Japanese pretty much words that are going to mean something like auf AUFNR. It's even hard to pronounce. It's an order. So we are having here an option for you to add your description, your friendly description. So we are actually reading that friendly description from SAP. And if you want to change it, if you want to put production order, if you want to put something else, you have that option. And that is very common. Let's say, for instance, there is a field that is called works. That works field on the production planning side, it refers to a plant. But on the sales order side, probably it's a distribution center. So now you can have a ubiquitous language, add your descriptions that the business is using to refer to that specific term, and that is going to help you to pretty much now be able to unlock that ubiquitous language, so that when you create a story, when you create that definition, that definition is going to flow all the way to your data engineers and your data analysts, as you mentioned, Nikhil, that you have different profiles. Right now it's not going to be in Japanese, it's going to be in simple plain business terms. So now from here we can send this data, we can then execute this data. And there are two different ways in which we envision this data flowing. One is SAP used to have something that is called iDocs. The iDocs are still there and are very valid. So we created our own version of iDocs that are called KDocs. So these are the Kafka documents. So basically, these Kafka documents are going to contain an entire document inside one single shot. So your entire sales order is going to go from SAP to Kafka, and we're going to create, the schema registries. We're going to convert it to Avro and put it in a topic for you. But then we can also send it, table by table. So let's say that you're creating a sales order. In a sales order, you have, let's say, 6, 7 different tables. So here we're going to create one table from SAP, one topic into Kafka, and then it can, for analytics, for instance, that can be one delta table for Databricks, or for Snowflake, another table. So this one, it has different use cases. You can send both. For instance, you can use KDocs for application-to-application integration, but then you can use tables for analytics tables, for analytics purposes. So I'm
So
gonna do a quick demo. Go ahead.
quick question. This is looking great. Thanks for the overview. Before the demo, just wanted to kind of point out that a lot of this overall solution, right, all the way from SAP to through Confluent Kafka to Databricks or Snowflake or the data warehouse, that is already a solution that you've built with Confluent using our Build with Confluent program that we have, that we want to talk about a little later, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's built following the standards of SAP, but also the best practices with Confluent. So we got those guidelines in place for us when we, built these solutions.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about the build with Confluent a little later, but just wanted to point out that this is an existing repeatable solution that we built together with ONIBEX and Confluent. So
Exactly. Yeah. So let's say, for instance, you have a production order here, but you want to add a Z table. So it's as simple as, just coming here, and then I'm going to say that I want to add a custom table that I have for production orders. So I'm just going to add here my production table and say, yep, this is the production table that I need. And boom, it's going to add it here, and it's going to propose me what fields I need to be joining this custom table to the standard document. If I need to create a different type of join, I can do that. It's very simple, but it's already recognizing that you should have a left outer join, a left inner join for this custom table, and it's as simple as that. If you want to add your custom ZDS views, your custom tables, is as simple as dragging and dropping in the data modeler, in the OneConnect data modeler. Okay, so I'm gonna do a very quick demo on how now we can send data in real time. So like I said, this is an S4HANA. So it works for Fiori, that is the new SAP interface. He works with Rise with SAP. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create here a sales order with 3 line items. So this is business as usual. I'm gonna put 1 here, 2, and then 3. Okay, so I have here my customer, my materials, and my quantities. I need to put a reference. So this is going to be test is 1248. There we go. There is a pricing validation there, but for this demo, we're not going to worry that much. So I'm just gonna save. The document is incomplete. Yeah, that's okay. All right. So we got this sales order that is 5734. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go here, for instance, to my snowflake. Come on, get out of there. And boom, this is the order 5734. And if I go to my SAP again, just to remind us, 5734. So this is a snowflake. So if I we have here our sales order, but then if I go also to Databricks, we can see that we have an order here too. It already landed here to Databricks. So it's going to multiple places. You have one producer and multiple subscribers. And of course, the data, the flow of the data is that it went to, I'm gonna change this to put the 1245, apply. There we go. So we have here that basically we sent data. But we're gonna put this 48. Oh, it's because it's AM and I want to have PM. There we go. So these are my 3 topics. And basically what it has is the material TG11, TG12, and the other material that I sent with this sales order that is the 5734, same as what I have here in SAP. So basically what we have here is that we have the messages, but we also have the schema. The schema, basically what it is the representation of the data in SAP. So we have, for instance, that the client is a null, it's a string, the sales document is a string, and the item, it's a number. So we also got the keys. So for instance, for this table that is the sales document item, the keys are the client, the sales document, and the item. But if I wanted to change the name of the item for product, I can do that so that I can keep that ubiquitous language. And then it's gonna go as product, on your different um, uh, applications where the downstream data is flowing. So now this is a simple exercise. What I'm gonna do here is something a little bit more interesting, where what I'm gonna do is one of the hardest things, or you want to have your data, make sure that your data is um, persistent. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change the quantities to 5, 4, 5, and 6. So here we go, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to save this document. It's again the pricing validation that SAP is telling us. But for now, we're not going to worry about those things. So I changed this document in SAP. So now what I'm gonna do is, if I go here to our Confluent, I can see here that it's jump by time, and let's see. Yeah, so these are my materials. And I can see here, somewhere I can see here, my new quantities. I can select which are the, oh, this is the 5. This is an ST, that is the unit, and we have the order quantity, which is the 5, right? So if I go here now to my Snowflake and I run this query again, here we go. So we're gonna have 4, 5, 6 in Snowflake. If I go to my Databricks and I run this, there you go, 4, 5, 6 for my order 5734. So it's going to keep consistency. You're not going to have duplicates. So we're using the ONIBEX connectors to Databricks and the ONIBEX connector to Snowflake. And with our connectors that are already validated by Databricks in, in their marketplace, we're going to have their published in a few days. And by Databricks, as Snowflake is in the process of getting there validated. So now a little bit more challenging. I'm going to delete the position. So I just delete the position number 20. That was the one in the middle, the TG12. So order 5734. And if I go to my Snowflake and I run this, boom. Now for the order 5734, we only have 2 line items, the line item number 10, the line number 30, and that will be the same because we're sending the primary keys. Remember that we have that capability. When we send the tables, we're sending the primary keys. Here, pretty much same thing. Line number 10, line number 30 for this sales order. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete the order altogether. So this is my sales order. It's not a usual practice to delete the document. You usually flag it for rejection, but in a lot of cases, users just go and delete the entire document. So I just went and delete my standard order 5734 is now deleted. So this is pretty much, for me to see that if I go to my Snowflake, boom, no more. 5734 is no longer in there. And if I go to my Databricks, boom, 5734 is not there. So we're gonna keep data consistency all across. And the beauty of this is that you can send your data once and you can use it many different times to replicate your data across multiple systems. So now let's go to the build with Confluent. So we have our connector, as we said, in the SAP store, but also we have this build with Confluent badge, that the certification verification from Confluent to future-proof your data modernization. So now what Confluent is doing is to create reusable solutions. And can you speak a little bit more about this build with Confluent, Nikhil?
Yeah, absolutely. So Build with Confluent is a program that I've been intimately involved with alongside Gustavo and a lot of our partners. We actually launched Build with Confluent as a program in June of 2024, a few months ago. And we actually, we did another launch at our flagship conference at Current about a week ago. And in the last 6 months, we have launched 26 repeatable solutions with over 20 partners. One of those solutions is what we're talking about here with Gustavo and ONIBEX's solution, which is basically future-proofing your SAP data. And Gustavo, you can talk a little bit more about what exactly the solution does, but we're super proud about all of the help that we've gotten from ONIBEX. The idea of Build with Confluent is to make sure that these repeatable solutions and patterns that we see are packaged into a solution that can be deployed at a customer, and making sure that the time to value, the business value, and so on, you're not starting from scratch. You have a repeatable template and a solution that you can work off of, right? So accelerate your time to value and your business. right? So that is the idea of build with Confluent. Like I said, you can go to the website. This is one of the solutions that we have here. So go ahead, Gustavo.
Yeah, so we're super excited because basically what we have here now is a very strong partnership with Confluent to completely liberate your SAP data. Now, that is the step number one. Let's democratize your SAP data. To do what? There are many different use cases. There are a lot of different use cases from application to application, business to business, analytics, not just for business intelligence, but for operational intelligence, so that now you can, merge your data because part of your story is in SAP. That's totally true. And let's say, for instance, production planning. Part of the story is on the SAP side, but then the other part of the story is the actual manufacturing of the product, right? So you need to join that data in real time to get, a full story to your users of what is going on a specific point in time. So you know what is, the production plan, but also what is the execution of that manufacturing. And like that, there are so many different use cases. Sales, for instance, what is the information that you have on the sales side, the inventory that might be managed by SAP, but then you probably have an e-commerce. You probably have a CRM, and having that fundamental data not just consume at rest but in motion, that is what Confluent is enabling. Now you can, for instance, have that inventory sitting in Confluent so that you can feed everybody, and every single movement that is happening in your SAP systems, let's say that is a good receipt or a goods issue, is going to be transmitted in real time. So you're always going to have that reality. The source of records, the system of records might be different other systems, but the reality is going to happen in that consolidated data fabric or that consolidated streaming engine that is OneConnect and Confluent. So we're going to be helping you to move that data in motion, and with this type of solutions, that is pretty much what we are doing together.
That's great. And Gustavo, if you don't mind, if you can scroll down a little bit just to show the actual architecture of the solution, which is kind of looks very cool, right? So you can see that Confluent is the heart of the solution here. Again, this is a build with Confluent solution, what we call BWC, which is build with Confluent. And on the left, you have all of the sources, which is SAP. And on the target, you have feeding all of your data warehouses. So this is a website that you can go to. You can go to confluent.io/use-cases and look for ONIBEX, and it'll pop up. So.
Awesome. Well, Nikhil, that is pretty much all of the topics that I have for this conversation. It was a very nice conversation with you. Nikhil, do you want to add something else?
No, that's it. I mean, thank you for your time. If there's any questions around, what we built with Gustavo's team, feel free to reach out to Gustavo or myself. Happy to give you more details. Thanks again
Absolutely.
for hosting me.
Thank you, Nikhil, for being part of this first podcast of Coffee with Engineers, Coffee with Nikhil, and I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye bye.